Hi there, Steve Kaufman here. I'm not really sure what I'm going to talk about here today, but it's going to be about education, and it comes from my experience on this email exchange with language and literacy teachers, and I mentioned in the previous video how they went. A majority of them see literacy as some kind of inevitably intertwined with ideology. One person said, obviously, teaching literacy, teaching language is inevitably involved with democracy and republicanism, was one statement from one of these teachers. So I pointed out that actually far more advances were made in literacy education in quite undemocratic states like China, the Soviet Union, and Cuba than took place, for example, in a democratic country like India. And she quotes me Jefferson and all kinds of American stuff. I'm not American. The world, to me, the model is not America. Literacy is literacy. There could be, as I mentioned, messages that are implicitly political or ideological, but you can also read a manual on how to I don't know, assemble furniture that you bought somewhere. So literacy is just about reading, period. What struck me is here you have all these people talking to each other via email. It takes a fair amount of time to do this. Basically, very little of what they say is of any use. Most of it they've heard many times before. Occasionally there's some reference to something that they're doing in class that might be of interest to someone else. A lot of it is just repeating a lot of the sort of pseudo-academic gibberish that they learned at school, all about discourse and postmodern and I don't know, all these terms. And of course, but they don't just do it via email. They go to conferences. They sit down together for 2 days and stay in hotels, and they have meetings. And I'm just wondering, and I know here in our education system in British Columbia, there are regular professional days where teachers go off and supposedly improve their skills. How much of these conferences are spent simply parroting back and forth things that they have heard many, many times before? One of the commenters mentioned or asked me what I thought of the comprehensible output theory. And I didn't know what that was, but I looked it up on the internet. It's so handy to do that these days. I saw Krashen. Of course, he poo-pooed it. He said it didn't amount to very much. It wasn't a very significant part of language learning. And then I looked at what this particular person, whose name was Meryl Swain, had to say. And she said that output helps us identify gaps in our knowledge. She had a few things to say that made sense to me, and I agree. I think that some degree of output is very useful in language training. First of all, you are training yourself in retrieving what you have learned, so that the practice of speaking is in itself something you got to practice. It's just that it's not always possible to do so. But where you have the opportunity, you obviously should. On the other hand, if you don't feel confident enough, there's no urgency to speak. I think you can continue to learn and acquire vocabularies without speaking vocabulary. The second thing is, I did some reading a while ago on this whole issue of mirror neurons. And it was pointed out that if you are a piano player and you hear a piano being played, that your neurons will fire the same way as if you are actually playing. But it only works if you are yourself a piano player. So I'm just guessing, but I have the feeling that if you do some speaking, it primes your neurons to some extent and makes you a little more receptive to what you're listening to. So, I mean, as I pointed out in a little article that I wrote, yes, input is key. Yes, the brain will pick it up, but the brain misses things. And that's why anything we can do to increase the attentiveness and the general alertness of the brain is good. So general alertness is one thing. And maybe this whole priming of the pump, the fact that you have tried to speak makes you more alert. And then second of all, to make you more attentive to specific things that you're trying to learn, like it could be the use of certain cases in Russian and so forth and so on. And that's where some of the things, again, that we do at Link, like the flashcarding, being corrected when you speak, when you write. I mean, these things don't bring about, it's not like you immediately learn. If you go through 50 flashcards, you don't immediately learn 50 words. And to try and do that is silly, because some words you'll learn right away and they'll stick, and some other words, you can look at them 10 times, you won't remember them. So that it's just a matter of just continuing to do it, and it's just making you just that little bit attentive until eventually those words become sticky. So being corrected is a bit like that. You won't necessarily get it right the next time or the next time, but being corrected and corrected and corrected, you eventually might start to notice that in the language a little bit more. Words the same way. But then I went to see, I found her on the web, Meryl Swain, and I went through her piece. And of course, it's so full of this academic language, and they're going to do research on, you know, they found 5 people in a class and who struggled to say this in French, and they said something else, and it reflected the influence of their English language or their attempt to apply a rule that they had felt they knew for French, but in fact it didn't apply, and so the thing didn't come out right or something, and extrapolating all kinds of theories. I just think it's just overly complicated. Listening is good, reading is good, speaking is also good. If you have the opportunity, do so, but you needn't do a lot of it. If you are not in a position where you can speak without paying for a teacher, which costs money, or without accosting people on the street, to practice your conversation, well, be happy with what you can do, listening and reading. So I think there's a tremendous tendency to overcomplicate these things. And I just wonder, in our education budget, I mean, if I look at our universities, if I look at what people study there, and the number of professors, especially in the humanities, who are so proud of doing research on obscure subjects. But this is all in our education budget. If we spend, whatever it is, 6-7% of our GDP on education, how much of it goes into useful learning activities? And how much of it goes into supporting this educational superstructure, infrastructure, whatever you want to call it, which is largely incestuous, just kind of feeding on itself. Let's all gather together and drink coffee and eat donuts and talk about stuff that we've all heard before, kind of is my feeling. So I just wonder about that. I think given the fact that education is so important to everyone, it gives them a bit, yeah, and maybe this is an ideological argument here that I'm sort of prejudiced, that I say people should you know, read better and speak more languages. But the fact of the matter is that people, by and large, want to, and they benefit from that. So maybe that's a prejudice. Maybe there's another mode, which is, let's say, the hunter-gatherer mode. You know, we'd all have a life expectancy of 25 or 30 years, but we wouldn't have to read. We wouldn't have capitalism. We wouldn't have any pharmaceutical companies. We just, you know, we just die after 25, 30 years the way we used to. So, but I don't know that that's a real option. So given the society that we do have, language literacy is very important. And are we spending our money wisely? When I see what happens in language instruction, I doubt it. What is the real, you know, efficiency of our education system? How much of it is spent on these relatively useless activities that amuse the practitioners but have relatively little benefit for the people who are actually learning? Look forward to hearing your comments. Thank you.